And the person that the piece that we're about to play, and the person that I'm going to introduce, probably at greater length than is good for all of us, is Joel Suben, who wrote the next piece on this program. Joel is a friend of mine from Richmond, Virginia, but he grew up, and I left this out of his biography, he grew up in central New York State, so he's really a native New Yorker, you could say. The piece that he wrote was completed on June the 15th of this year, and the parts have been coming in pieces since about the beginning of June, until we finally got the corrected printed parts from the publisher 2 weeks ago yesterday. So we've been trying very hard to learn to play the piece, and the piece is in a little bit different musical idiom than some of us are used to playing, at least frequently. But it's been great fun for us to see what's going to come of this piece. And we hope it's been fun for Joel to find out what has come of it in the 2 weeks that we've had to really seriously work at preparing it as an ensemble. And without any further ado, I'm going to run away and fetch my clarinet while I introduce Joel Suben, who's going to tell you a little bit about the birth of Euphrosyne.
Thank you very much. It has been fun to hear what these four musicians have accomplished in too short a time. Fun doesn't begin to describe it. It's being a composer is like being a parent, and this is a birth that you're about to witness tonight as they play the music. I conceived this piece as a relatively pleasant work. I generally write very complex, serious, even sober pieces, and I thought it was time for something more lighthearted. And this was an opportunity to also to be a little bit more romantic with a capital R than I usually have been in my music. And so this, in many ways, is my first tone poem. And it was inspired by a well-known poem of John Milton, L'Allegro, the happy one, which has given us some very well-known phrases. Perhaps the most famous, "Come and trip it as you go on the light fantastic toe," tripping the light fantastic. And if you would forgive me for dismembering Milton's poem, as I read some fragments of it, I think it would do more good to read the fragments which I really am trying to represent in a very vague way than for me to describe the technical construction of the piece. The piece is in 5.5 sections. The first one is rather joking. It's marked scherzando, jokingly. Then there is a very brief, slow transition to a section which is essentially a little minuet or very slow waltz marked commodo, comfortably. And then after about 1.5 minutes of that, there is a very brief section in which I want the players to sound like bells. I want the pealing of bells to be represented, and you'll see why when I read the line in the poem. And that is followed by a section marked jocoso, jokingly, in a more vicious, malicious, prankster sense than the opening of the piece. And then finally it ends peacefully. Let me read the sections of the poem that caught my attention for a long, long time. And I think you'll see that Milton refers to music a great deal. The first section of my piece, I had in mind about the 25th through 30th lines of the poem, so it's not just a run-through of the poem in music by any means. Haste thee, nymph, Euphrosyne being the goddess of mirth. Haste thee, nymph, and bring with thee jest and youthful jollity, quips and cranks and wanton wiles, nods and becks and wreathed smiles. That's a rather malicious and mischievous kind of idea. Then there's "Come and trip it as you go on the light fantastic toe." That will be the fourth, the next to the last section, is the most manic and bumpy sections of the piece, and that's where I had in mind "Come and trip it as you go on the light fantastic toe." That's about about 5/8 of the way through the piece, and that is really the high point of intensity of the piece. And he refers a little bit later down to hear the lark begin his flight and singing startle the dull night. It began to appear to me that I could make use of Milton's reference to music in relation to startling and surprising and interrupting, which is not really what we associate with pleasantry, is it? But then again, an artist is not always thinking like a good boy. While the cock with lively din scatters the rear of darkness thin, and then I'm going to read the middle of the poem, which is represented or briefly referred to in the last part of my piece. Oft listening how the hounds and horn cheerily rouse the slumbering morn. And you will hear not an outright imitation of hunting horns, but a very vague pastoral sound, a quiet sound that I hope that you will hear. Then what is the third main section, the shortest of the sections that I referred to, bells. In the poem, when the merry bells ring round and the jocund rebecks sound, rebec being an ancient Arabic word for fiddle. Since we have a couple of the fiddle family in this little ensemble, the flute and the clarinet have to be rebecks also, sounding like bells for a minute. In the quiet section that closes the piece, I also was very haunted by this line, by whispering winds soon lull the sleep, and the busy hum of men, etc., etc., etc. I won't go on. Then there's a wonderful bunch of lines here. Then to the well-trod stage anon, if Johnson's learned sock be on, or sweetest Shakespeare fancy's child, warble his native wood notes wild. And you'll hear a lot of warbling, especially in the clarinet and the flute. And ever against eating cares, lap me in soft Lydian airs, married to immortal verse, such as the meeting soul may pierce in notes with many a winding bout of linked sweetness long drawn out. And then the last reference, a very vague one, throughout the piece, untwisting all the chains that tie the hidden soul of harmony. Well, in the next to the last, in the beginning of the last section, for the first time, I let the players play with the same rhythm for a long period, and it's a peculiar kind of harmony. The rest of the piece is rather twisted and convoluted, and I swear I did mean it to be good-natured. And I thank you in advance for your patience in listening to it.